All right, guys, this is the 311 quiz review for English 2. So a few things that you need to know about this quiz. It is 6 questions. It focuses on the second half of Cry the Beloved Country, so from chapter 17 through the end of the book, through 36. We're going to talk a little bit about themes, the impact of languages, and some literary devices like imagery, point of view, and symbolism. So let's first talk about some themes. Some of the themes that we see throughout Cry the Beloved Country are the idea of reconciliation and forgiveness, and that they are very powerful forces. The theme of the loss of traditional values that can be disastrous to a society. Forgiveness, unity, and hope are all possible. Power leads to corruption and injustice. And finally, in the fight for justice, intention is just as important as action. So, with the theme of reconciliation and forgiveness being powerful forces, we see this theme emerge in the way that James Jarvis handles the murder of his son, Arthur Jarvis, in the second half of the book. After reading his son's writing, James Jarvis lets go of his anger. He begins to implement his son's philosophies and even develops a friendship with Kumalo. Where we see this evidenced in the text is in chapter 31. It says, "The man lifted the cans from the cart and said, 'Where shall I put them, Mfundisi?' But Kumalo was dumb and stupid, and his wife said, 'We shall put them in the room that the Mfundisi has in the church.' So they put them there. And when they came back, the man said, 'You would surely have a message for Jarvis, Mfundisi.' And Kumalo stuttered and stammered, and at last pointed his hand up at the sky. And the man said, 'Tikso will bless him.' And Kumalo nodded." So we see the forgiveness from Arthur's dad to Absalom's dad, and this reconciliation and this building of a relationship between these two men. James Jarvis is helping Kumalo despite the fact that Kumalo's son Absalom killed his son Arthur. The loss of traditional values can be disastrous to a society. We see this theme in what happens to both Gertrude and Absalom when they leave home and they move to Johannesburg. Absalom leaves his village only to be corrupted by the amoral and divided city, which leads him into a life of crime that costs him and another man their lives. Some textual evidence here is found early in the novel in chapter 5. Says, "So they all talked of the sickness of the land, of the broken tribe, and the broken house, of young men and young girls that went away and forgot their customs and lived loose and idle lives. They talked of young criminal children and older, more dangerous criminals, of how white Johannesburg was afraid of black crime. One of them went and got him a newspaper, the Johannesburg Mail, and showed him in bold black letters, 'Old couple robbed and beaten in lonely house. 4 natives arrested.'" As far as themes of forgiveness, unity, and hope, one way we see this in the way that Kumalo teaches James Jarvis's grandson, Zulu. Despite their differences in age and background, Kumalo and the boy are shown to find some common ground in enjoying one another's company as they learn to speak the same language. And in chapter 33, we see an example of that where Kumalo is interacting with Arthur Jarvis's son and teaching him to speak Zulu, which is their traditional dialect, their traditional African language. Another way we see this theme is through the description of Arthur Jarvis's study, where he has this picture of Abraham Lincoln, and the author mentions this several times. He points it out several times throughout the text. This tells us that despite the injustices caused by prejudice and hatred, there is still hope for a united South Africa. Furthermore, after the trial, a white man breaks tradition and goes over to the black side to help Kumalo. This shows us that the racial division in South Africa can be mended, despite how grim the situation appears. Power leads to corruption and injustice. We see this theme in John Kumalo's speech about the discovery of gold. Police officers are meant to maintain law and order, and they're meant to serve and protect the people. However, the police officer's comments about killing John before he becomes a problem show readers how corrupt the city and the government truly is. This also demonstrates how a person's race can put them in literal danger in South Africa at this time. So some of the textual evidence that I chose was from chapter 26. It says, "I tell you, the man is dangerous," said the one policeman. "I believe you now that I have heard him," said the other. "Why don't they put the bastard inside?" "Why don't they shoot him?" asked the first. "Or shoot him," agreed the other. "The government is playing with fire," said the first. "I believe you," said the second. This is in reference to the police dealing with John. In the fight for justice, intention is just as important as action. We see this theme in John Kumalo's speech about the discovery of gold. John's speech reveals that he is on the morally right side of the issue, but his intentions are not pure. He's fighting for the people, not because it's the right thing to do, but to feed his own ego and satisfy his need for power. In chapter 26, he says, "Perhaps we should thank God he is corrupt," said Simango solemnly, for if he were not corrupt, he could plunge this country into bloodshed. He is corrupted by his possessions, and he fears their loss and the loss of power he already has. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the impact of language in the novel. In chapter 9, it says, "Outside there is singing, singing round a fire. It is Kosi Sikilel, Africa, that they sing. God save Africa. God save this piece of Africa that is my own, delivered in travail from my body, fed from my breast, loved by my heart, because that is the nature of women. Oh, lie quietly, little one." How does this language affect the excerpt? This is from chapter 9, and we spent a good deal of time in small group last week looking at chapter 9. So how does the language affect this excerpt? The use of traditional African language to name the song transports readers to the setting of the story, and it gives it this heightened sense of authenticity. It means God bless Africa, though in the book it is taken to mean God save Africa. This lovely hymn is rapidly becoming accepted as the national anthem of the Black people in South Africa. Pronunciation, Nkosi, Sekeli, and the hard G and E approximately as in bed, Africa, with an A as in father, is shortened to E, so Africa. In chapter 12, we see this excerpt where we actually get a glimpse into the title and where the title comes from. It says, "Cry, the beloved country, for the unborn child, that's the inheritor of our fear. Let him not love the earth too deeply. Let him not laugh too gladly when the water runs through his fingers, nor stand too silent when the setting sun makes red the veld with fire. Let him not be too moved when the birds of his land are singing, nor give too much of his heart to a mountain or a valley, for fear will rob him if he gives too much." How does the language in this excerpt affect the reader's understanding of the novel's setting? The description captures the great beauty of South Africa while also suggesting the suffering and the desperation that characterizes the country at the time the novel is set. And then in chapter 8, we have a quote talking about Johannesburg. It says, "It was still a long way to 23rd Avenue, and as they passed one avenue after another, Simango explained that Alexandra was outside the boundaries of Johannesburg and was a place where a black man could buy land and own a house. But the streets were not cared for. and there were no lights. And so great was the demand for accommodation that every man, if he could, built rooms in his yard and sublet them to others. Many of these rooms were hideouts for thieves and robbers, and there was much prostitution and brewing of illicit liquor. How does this language affect our understanding of Johannesburg in the 1950s? This excerpt really captures the deep division, the unfairness, and the danger that existed in this time and place. Let's look at some imagery. This quote says, "Men as old as you are doing it every day, Mfundisi, and women, and some that are sick, and children, they start walking at 4 in the morning, and they do not get back till 8 at night. They have a little food, and their eyes are hardly closed before they must stand up again, sometimes to start off again with nothing but hot water in their stomachs. I cannot stop you from taking a bus, but this is a cause to fight for. If we lost it, then they will have to pay more in Sophiatown and other places." So this happens when they're searching for Absalom. Khumalo and Sumangu encounter a bus boycott. So when he's describing the boycott to Khumalo, the speaker relies on this very vivid imagery. So how does this imagery of the excerpt affect Khumalo? How does this stand out to him? It really shows the importance of this boycott to the South African people, and it also shows how important it is to Khumalo. So they all talked of the sickness of the land, of the broken tribe and the broken house, of young men and young girls that went away and forgot their customs and lived loose and idle lives. They talked of young criminal children and older, more dangerous criminals, of how white Johannesburg was afraid of black crime. How does the imagery of this excerpt develop meaning? We have this repetition of the broken, and that just reinforces this idea that society is divided and that traditional values are being lost. And here, all roads lead to Johannesburg. If you are white or if you are black, they lead to Johannesburg. If the crops fail, there is work in Johannesburg. If there are taxes to be paid, there's work in Johannesburg. If the farm is too small to be divided further, some must go to Johannesburg. If there is a child to be born that must be delivered in secret, it can be delivered in Johannesburg. How does the imagery in this excerpt develop meaning? It really emphasizes that Johannesburg, this big city, is seen as the solution to all the problems. And that's why so many people go there. So many people go finding a solution or seeking out a resolution to their problems. There's also a bit of foreshadowing here, as we will see later that Johannesburg becomes overwhelmed by the number of people moving there, so it becomes its own separate problem for people that go there. So instead of going and finding the solution to their problem, they often just end up with more problems once they get there. In this excerpt, in the deserted harbor, there is yet water that laps against the quays. In the dark and silent forest, there is a leaf that falls. Behind the polished paneling, the white ant eats away the wood. Nothing is ever quiet, except for fools. The imagery here shows us that just because you can't always see decay or destruction doesn't mean that it isn't happening. So let's talk about point of view here. In the second half of the novel, in chapter 26, when John Khumalo is making his speech about the discovery of gold, the narrator relies on this third-person omniscient point of view to show that there are multiple things happening at once. We have the speech that John is giving, we have the way the police officers are reacting to the speech, And then we see the way Kumalo and Simangu react to the speech. So we've got these three pieces all kind of working together. And because we have this third person omniscient point of view, we see all of these pieces simultaneously. So why does Alan Paton use the third person omniscient point of view throughout John Kumalo's speech about the discovery of gold? Why does he do this? This fluid perspective allows Paton to provide the reader with a broader understanding of the history, the landscape, and the cultural experience of the characters throughout the novel. We get to see everybody's reaction here, everybody's point of view. So let's talk about, lastly, some key symbols. The crumbling of the church in Dodgshini at the start of the novel. What might that symbolize? And as you get further into the reading, it becomes more and more obvious. The church crumbling symbolizes the destruction of traditional values as well as the loss of hope. What does the rebuilding of the church at Dodgshini at the end of the novel symbolize? Well, quite the opposite, right? It suggests the renewal of hope and the promise of a better future for South Africa. At the end of the novel, Kumalo sees this beautiful sunrise. So what does that sunrise symbolize? And how does it affect or impact the mood of the text? The sunrise symbolizes the hope for a better future for South Africa, and it leaves us feeling a little bit more optimistic. It creates a more optimistic mood. All right, guys, for the 311 quiz, make sure you've finished reading, okay? That quiz covers from chapter 17 all the way to the end of the novel. So make sure you finished reading, you've watched this recording, taken down some notes, whatever you need to do, and then you are good to go on the 311. As always on quizzes, you get 3 attempts, so do your best. If you need to take it again, take it again. But good luck, guys. If you've got any questions, send me an email, shoot me a text, call me. Good luck.